Good evening, everyone. We've got lots of people tuning in already. That's great to see, and I hope you're all well and had a fantastic week or couple of weeks. How long has it been since we since we all met like this? And we must keep meeting like this, otherwise people they'll talk. But let them talk for now. That's okay. Anyway, this is episode 22 of the Lowestoft History Sessions. We've had even more of the shanty sessions on a Tuesday night. And what a wonder it's been. It's been a real pleasure for Stephen and myself. I'm sure Ivan will agree to meet like this online when it hasn't always been possible to meet in person. We've got all kinds of restrictions going on in the UK still, and this has been a real constant for us to know that we can reach out across the digital divide and meet up with people in a different kind of way than we were used to. So thank you all for your company so far over the last 21 sessions. As I said, this is number 22. The final session from Ivan and the Lowestoft History Sessions, number 23, will be in 2 weeks' time. I'm just going to flash that banner up so that we all know. So that's on the 21st of December, will be Ivan's final session with us on the Lowestoft History Sessions. I have to say, Stephen and I, we've enjoyed it immensely. And we've been honoured to be joined by such a local legend of Lowestoft as is Ivan Bunn, the historian. And he's brought something even more so than we could have ever asked of him. And that's just fascination. He's really brought history to life. And we're looking forward to tonight. Tonight's episode, number 22, is entitled The Story Behind Battery Green in Lowestoft, of course, making it very, very local to Lowestoft, that wonderful piece of coast that we know and love. Lots of us do. And some of us, you may have moved away and you're tuning in just to be reminded of that beautiful, most easterly stretch of coastline. And of course, the story behind Battery Green is, as ever, when it comes to Ivan's topics, a very, very interesting one. I won't spoil it because I don't know enough, but obviously Ivan does, and he's going to really paint some vivid pictures. But it'll be so interesting because we think of this beautiful stretch of coastline that we all enjoy, and throughout much of our history, we've had to defend, quite literally defend. And when we think of all these Brexit negotiations going on and how entangled and bitter they seem to be becoming, at least we know that we will always have friendship across the channel in our European cousins, and long may that continue, because obviously Lowestoft being the closest point to them, it's been throughout history quite a contentious stretch of coastline. Anyway, I'm going to stop rabbiting and I'm going to move on to some of the wonderful comments that we've already started to come in. One from Chris Collins. She says, "Good evening, guys. Good evening, Ivan." Couple of waves. Ivan's always interested to get your good evenings and hellos, so I'm sure he'll respond himself. One from Linda Boyce. "Hi, Paul. Hi, Ivan." Good evening, Linda. Thank you very much for joining us. And evening all comes from Jackie Draper and the Draper household, which I'm sure tonight, as always, includes Mr. Barry Draper, two of our favourite people, Barry and Jackie, and someone I go way, way back with, and I've had the pleasure to, Ivan educates us alongside each other tonight, and we were educated alongside each other in our school days. And it's Mr. James Wright, a real decent gentleman. He says, "Good evening all. Looking forward to another educational talk." And me too. Me too, Jim. Jerry Paul says, "Hello, all you lovely people." And that means a lot coming from Jerry, because she is just such a one as a lovely person. Karen Godbold says, "Hello to you all." And someone who's been joining us on the Shanty Sessions on a Tuesday night is Dave van der Brooker. He says, "Hello, everyone." Hello, Dave or Dav. Not sure how you pronounce it, but I hope that's right. Trevor Phelps. He says, "Best wishes to everyone." And I think he's encapsulating everybody in there, really, doing a wonderful job of that. As I said, we have some fantastic topics across the last 21 episodes. Tonight is no different. It is the story behind Battery Green in Lowestoft. Ivan's going to absolutely delight you all, I'm sure. But I'm just going to make an impassioned plea. Would you please click share? Would you do that for us? All you have to do is to click share. And the reason I ask you to do that is because it means we are able to engage with a few more people. Just click this little lady, share, Sherilyn, as she's known to her family, but Cher, as we call her here in the Rogues Shanty Chorus and the Lowestoft history sessions. By doing so, you can ensure that we reach a slightly bigger audience. So perhaps all of your friends and your family, the people you have that follow you and that you follow, if you click that share button in Facebook or even on our YouTube channel, you will be able to make sure that we engage with just a few more people, and more people get to hear Ivan's fantastic talks. And that's really important to us. And I know Ivan really appreciates it as well. But it's not just important to us. Oh, no. It's important to our funders as well, which is the People's Health Trust. Now, they fund us through the Active Communities Programme. They have done for well over a year now, and they've made it so that we can continue our Lowestoft shanty sessions. We could continue them online when we went into the original lockdown, and all through into the second lockdown as well, and beyond. They've even made it so that we can endeavour to bring these Lowestoft history sessions to you online with Mr. Ivan Bunn. So we really do owe them a massive debt of gratitude, and I know they're very, very grateful when you comment and let us know what you think, not just of their involvement, but just in general. Get involved, put some comments on, and if you click share, that just makes it even more special for us. So as I say, they've made it so we can work with people from 2 years old to 90 years young, all kinds of abilities and experience when it comes to music. Some people are accomplished musicians. Some people have just begun on their love of music and folk music and sea shanties in general. And of course, throughout this epidemic period, 2020, COVID-19, it's meant that we can engage with people across the world, not just those that are very much on our doorstep and perhaps had never heard of the Voice Cloud or the Rogues Shanty Chorus before. And as I said, it means that these very local Lowestoft history sessions have come to us directly to your computer, your tablet, your phone, your smart TV, anything. You might be viewing us on our Facebook page, the Rogues Shanty Chorus or the Rogues Shanty Boys. You may even be joining us from the Voice Cloud page, or you may be tuning in on YouTube. All of these sessions are available to view again. Don't go to them yet because we have a fascinating talk tonight. And I will just say that although our last scheduled Lowestoft history session is coming up in a fortnight, we are endeavouring to secure some extra funding that maybe will continue it into next year, or perhaps adapt it slightly, bring it to you in a live format setting at the Lowestoft Theatre, so you can come and enjoy some other talks from Ivan in person. We'll have to see, obviously, how the epidemic plays out, and but we certainly hope to be there with you in next year as well with these history sessions. We just need the money to do it. Anyway, Diana Carver says, good evening again. Looking forward to this evening's talk. Me too, Diana, and lovely to know you're out there. Chris Collins says, shared. Thank you very much, Chris. I said Dave Vanderbrooker. He says short A, like bad, not bade. So Dev, or Dav. There we go. Dav Vanderbrooker. Sorry about that, Dav. How about Susan Anderton, who says, looking forward to another brilliant evening. Thanks, Ivan. She's thanking him in advance because she knows, as she said, it's going to be a brilliant evening. And finally, before I go to Ivan, who's been waiting patiently backstage, is Sarah Jordan. Lovely Sarah, who says, good evening, everyone. She's giving a little shaky hand there. And thank you, Sarah Jordan. Lovely to know you're watching us as well. So without further ado, because I've been doing all sorts tonight, I'm going to say good evening to the wonderful Mr. Ivan Bunn. Hi, Ivan. How are you?
Good evening. I'm fine, thank you, Paul. Good evening, everybody out there. Thanks for coming to join us again. I hope you're going to enjoy this evening's talk. If I look a bit pink, it's because a month ago I had new central heating put in, and I'm beginning to regret it, I think. That's like sitting in the mud here, so I might have to loosen the tie a bit before I get started.
Steady on, old boy.
Chance I get to go out in public with a tie on, though. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. I made a list of all your names, except I lost tracks. So it was Diana, Linda, Chris, James, Jerry, my lovely friend Jerry. Nice to see you again. Well, I know you're there anyway, Jerry. Susan, Sarah, and Dav, is it?
Dav, yeah.
I got that one right. And Trevor, and anybody else I've left out. It's not because I don't want to say hi. It's simply because I didn't write your name down on my bit of paper quick enough, and my memory isn't what it was.
I think you did pretty well there, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, looking forward to this evening. I hope you'll enjoy it. It is very, very localized. After I finished the whole presentation, I thought, well, hang on a minute, if there's somebody sitting on the other side of the country, they probably might not know Lowestoft, or its topography or the layout of the town. I apologise for that, but hopefully you'll still get the gist of what was going on in the town and what this Battery Green that I should be talking about, I've got to say is, perhaps it's a little bit too of a stronger word to use. Perhaps you say what it was. We'll see Battery Green later. Fortunately, the incidents all take place during the lifetime of probably Lowestoft's most distinguished historian antiquarian. Here we are. This is his book, published in 1790. It's Edmund Gillingwater's History of Lowestoft. I don't know if you can see that if I lift it up. There we are. I'm very fortunate to possess a copy of that. And he was about, during the period, he was actually writing this book during the period when the focus of the story is. So, and he gives a lot of information in there, and he also chucks in a few local anecdotes as well from obviously what he'd seen personally, which kind of makes it nice. So thank you, Edmund Gillingwater, for doing that. 1790, the book. I'm fortunate to have the first edition of it here. Which
looks
is
quite a weighty tome as well.
It is indeed, yeah, literally. Yeah. So I suppose really with no more ado, I got my notes. Got it there. I think I'm probably ready to rock and roll. This stretch of the coastline here, as we are the closest point in the UK to Holland. Holland, 70 miles as the crows fly. We're closer to the Dutch coast than we are to London here. And there's always been certain contentiousness, if that's the right word, between this country and the Dutch. I think we've been at war 4 times during the history. We're all good friends now. Hopefully it will stay that way despite Brexit. And so it has been a part of the coast that's needed defending. So if we can roll the presentation for me, please, Paul. And I shall get stuck in. So this is my title page coming up, just to tell you what it is I'm going to be talking about, in case you're not aware. I'm sure you will be by now. So I've called this Defending the Town, the story behind Battery Green. As you can see, this is the focuses on the late 18th century. But before we really get started on that, I'm going to do, I think in modern parlance, is what we would call the backstory. Very, very briefly, the events that led us up to the main gist of the story. The earlier reference I've been able to find to having guns placed along the coast at Lowestoft was in February 1539, when it was planned to have built fortifications at Lowestoft to defend the coast. And the following year, in the Royal Armouries in the Tower of London, some cannon ordnance, they called them, were cast and brought up to the town. And by March 1542, by this date, there was 3 small gun batteries that had been established in the town. One of them on the Deans. Now, for those that don't know Lowestoft very well, we have a very low-lying at sea level area of Deans, sand dunes, if you like, to the east of the town, which is perched on the cliff. You can see this little sketch map here. And there was 3 small gun batteries established by March 1542, one on the Deans, approximately the park today we call Sparrow's Nest, which is at the top of the cliff, one at Nest Point, which is the sticky out bit, today the most easterly point in the UK, and one at the southern end of the town. Each was said to have 3 or 4 small cannon, and gunners were trained and employed. The Duke of Norfolk's Coastal Survey Map of 1545 shows a very, very crude sketch of what was there. This is the map here. It's very poor quality. I apologize for that. You can see a gun battery on the on Nest Point, right at the just off centre to the right. Behind that, on the cliff top, you can see the town of Lowestoft. There's a signal station there. There's a smaller, those black blobs that you can see are smaller gun batteries. There's one at the top of the cliff, approximately where Sparrow's Nest is today. And this is, I'm saying, 1545. There was another one at Kirkley. There was another one at Pakefield. There was another one at Kessingland. So the coast was being well protected. On another little sketch map that I came across, the inset there, you can see it shows the main fortification on Nest Point with a couple of subsidiary small gun batteries to the north and south of it, and slightly further inland on the Deans. The wonderful thing I like doing about this is you can learn. Apparently, as well as cannon, there were 2 slings. And so I did some research and found out there's a picture of a sling at the top. A sling is kind of like a giant shotgun, if you like, very primitive. And you would fill it with nuts, bolts, chunks of iron, and use that as a sort of an anti-personnel weapon. Apparently, these were called slings, and they were also mounted in the gun batteries along with the cannon. I haven't been able to find any details of the cannon, but at that time they would still have been really fairly primitive ones. In 4 years later, in August 1549, during Kett's rebellion, the peasants revolt locally. Robert Kett, he actually, his men attacked Lowestoft, captured all the 6 cannon, took them to Great Yarmouth, and tried to capture Great Yarmouth, but was unsuccessful. Finally, 20 years later, Elizabeth I granted 4 cannon and 2 slings to the town to be mounted for its defence. But 9 years later, it was reported that the guns were dismounted and were in need of repair. 1587, the year before the Spanish Armada, 1588, the fair of the Spanish Armada, more cannon were mounted at Lowestoft on the site of the earlier cannon. And we know very little more about it then. We know there was a survey in 1625 of all the fortifications on the coast. There's no mention of Lowestoft, so we assume probably that the cannons were okay at that time. And if you can remember one of the talks I did months ago now, when Oliver Cromwell came into town, he captured the town cannon and took them away. They were later returned to the town and mounted on a platform again near Nest Point. As so often happens along this stretch of coast, the platform was later washed away, and it again was replaced with another platform, and that was also washed away by the sea, and the cannon were left on the beach. In March 1663, Lowestoft petitioned the Duke of Albemarle for 4 cannon in the town that might be retained by them in order to guard the coast against attack. The only time I could find a reference to there being an attack was let's turn, this is February 1665, a Dutch privateer fired on the cannon, but apparently the cannon had no ammunition to fire back. And during that very brief one-sided exchange, a certain Major Wild of Lowestoft on the 5th of February was actually killed. The entry in the parish registers of his burial says that he was shot by a musket ball in the Wesson, W-E-S-S-O-N. I had no idea what a Wesson was, but it's a very old word meaning the neck or throat. So he was killed there. But most times there was nothing. The guns were there, but it seems as if they mount new guns. They don't get used. They get ignored, really. They've become derelict. Remember, the town has to pay for these guns and to fire them and man them at this point. So, and Lowestoft being really just a large village on the cliff top, didn't have the funds to do that. So it's a sign of, it's a continuous case, really, of preparation, mounting the guns, not using the guns, neglecting the guns, or the guns on this point in particular getting washed away. However, if we come to the next slide, please, which brings me up to 1744. Here's my map of Lowestoft. I'm sure you've seen this in many of my talks. I have to explain that, like everything I've said during the past, nothing happens in isolation. So some of my pictures and stories do overlap with earlier ones that I've done. But that arrow points to a tiny piece of land belonging to the town. It was called the Maids Acre, and it was at the bottom of Old Nelson Street in Lowestoft. There's a close-up of it. And again, there's a bit of an overlap here because some guns were mounted on this field, this Maids Acre, just a small 1 acre field. And one of the houses in front of it had to be cleared to give it an arc of fire. It's at the southern end of the town. The reason it's at the southern end of the town, that's the very, very low lying, unlike the rest of the town at the top of the cliff. And that would be a very, very strategic point for an invasion rather than come further to the north and then cross the Deans and have to fight your way up the cliff. And to give a clear field of fire to protect the town from an incursion there, the houses in front of Maids Acre had to be cleared. And the house that I've ringed there, in actual fact, again, going back to another one of the talks that I've given in, I don't know how many weeks or months ago it was now, that was in actual fact the House of Amy Denny, the woman who in 1662 was hanged as a witch. That's why her house is no longer in existence. It was demolished to clear the field of fire of the cannon that were placed on the Maids Acre. And if we go to the next slide, please, here's a contemporary drawing. You can see, you have to tilt your head on one side. You can see this is the Maids Acre, also known by the time this map was drawn, about 1760, I think it was. It was known as the Gun Piece, Maids Acre or Gun Piece. Notice to the north, you can see the road going to Pakefield running in front of it. South will take you through to Kirkley and Pakefield. North will take you up what's now present day Old Nelson Street into the High Street. In 1744, a battery of 6 18-pounder guns was erected here to protect the south end of the town and the shipping in the roads. The roads, I'm sure most of you know, that's the term used for the shipping lanes immediately off the coast here. The Lowestoft roads, as they were called, the Kirkley roads further south, Yarmouth roads further north. And in 1756, another battery containing 2 18-pounders and some older guns was actually erected near Nest Point. So we're going right back to where we were 200 years previous. The cannon that were erected there 200 years ago had long since disappeared, washed away, but a new battery, a smaller one, is built there. Just something I ask you to bear in mind. If you look immediately to the north, towards almost in the centre, you can see coloured orange with a grey roof and a gable end. You can see a house, quite a large. It was actually a farmhouse, 17th century farmhouse, owned by the Ward family at that time. Now, bear that in mind, because we will come back to that much later in this talk. So by 1756, we've got a battery of 6 18-pounder guns on the Maids Acre, and we've got another smaller battery of 2 18-pounder guns somewhere near Nest Point on the platform. Right, if we move to the next slide, please. Now, in December 1780, Britain declared war on Holland. I won't go into any details of the war because it was all to do with economics, etc., etc. It's the fourth time we'd been at war with the Dutch in 100 years. And to protect this area coast, soldiers were shipped in. A large camp was set up at Hopton. There was another camp set up in to the west of the town, but at the on East Heath, near present-day Kirkley Run. Units of the 19th Light Horse were also stationed here, and they patrolled the coast between Yarmouth and Kessingland every night. So they're taking this threat of a possible invasion from Holland very, very seriously. We got 2 companies of the East Norfolk militia were quartered in the town, as I said. And so the town is becoming quite militaristic because, as I said, we're only 70 odd miles away from the Dutch coast, and the Dutch have a damn good navy, and the possibility of invasion was, according to the authorities, to the government in this country, was a possibility. And so they're beginning to send soldiers, both regular army soldiers and local militia units, into the town as a form of protection. Now, Gillingwater tells us, and he was here at the time, if we go to the next slide, please, this seems to be the pivotal point of the town, that on the 31st of July 1781, these 2 high-ranking British Army officers, together with all their entourage of lesser officers, visited the town to inspect the defences. There was Lord Geoffrey Amherst, who was the commander-in-chief of all His Majesty's forces at the time, accompanied by Lieutenant General William Tryon. That's a lovely name. He was commander-in-chief under Lord Amherst of all the forces in the area. Now, remember, Lowestoft at that time is only a small town, around about 4,000 men, women and children. This must have been quite an event. You've got the soldiers turning up, you've got the light horse every night patrolling the coast in case there's an invasion fleet approaching, so they can raise the alarm. Then you've got all these high-ranking military officers with their flunkies coming into town and assessing the state of defences. The real tipping point, which leads into really the next part of the story, happened in the following month. And if we go, and we rely on Gillingwater for this, if we go to the next slide, please. On 13th of August 1781, Gillingwater tells us there was a great alarm in the town. And the reason for this great alarm was because a large fleet of warships was seen approaching Lowestoft, and there was panic in the town, apparently, because everybody had convinced themselves or were convincing each other that this was a Dutch invasion fleet. It wasn't. It was, in actual fact, a large British fleet commanded by Admiral Sir Hyde Parker, who had been involved a few days earlier with the Dutch fleet at the Battle of Dogger Bank on the 5th of August. There was no real outcome of this battle. Perhaps a skirmish might be the thing. And this was the British fleet returning and sailing through the roads close to Lowestoft. But it certainly brought panic to the people of Lowestoft, according to Gillingwater. Excuse me while I have a little drink. We don't know if the generals were in town at the time when this happened, still inspecting the defences, but certainly word got back. And this would, I think, was the trigger for what would happen next in Lowestoft. So we pass on to the next slide. This started again, according to Gillingwater, brought more troops into the town to patrol the town. Here's a lovely picture of Lowestoft's High Street at this time. And Gillingwater tells us that a descent on this coast was so much apprehended about this time that a party of soldiers patrolled through Lowestoft every 4 hours during the night in order, if necessary, to give an alarm of an invasion fleet. And so not only now have we got the light horse every night riding the coast looking for incursions anywhere along the coast, we've actually got a party of soldiers tramping through the town every 4 hours just to check that everything's okay. If you're familiar with Lowestoft, the score that you can see opposite you, the gap in the buildings and the sea beyond, that's actually present day Crown Score, if my memory serves me right. And so there is this build-up. 4th of September, General Tryon, I will call him Tryon, was back in the town, and he ordered the test firing of the old cannon on Maids Acre, on the gun piece. One of them burst, one of them exploded, and on the 11th of October, he was here again with his gunners from the Royal Artillery, and he ordered the test firing of the 3 old cannon that were lying on the beach near Nest Point. They must have been remounted on the carriages and fired. All 3 of them burst. So it's pretty obvious to General Tryon that the cannon that were here to defend the town were pretty useless, that something had to be done about this to defend this very, very strategic and somewhat vulnerable stretch of coast. And so if we move on again to the next slide, it was decided that 3 batteries of guns should be built. Here's the town of Lowestoft. The east is at the bottom, north is to the right, south is to the left, and obviously west at the top. This is the small town at the top of the cliff. 3 batteries would be built. There was the South Battery near Maids Acre. There was the Cliff Battery, where Bellevue Park is today, and a North Battery right on the, literally on the beach. And so these are the 3 batteries that they decided had to be built to ensure the defence of Lowestoft while at war with the Dutch. And it didn't take long before the Royal Engineer personnel turned up to start on the building. Although they're not really salient to my talk about Battery Green tonight, I thought I would just show you the Cliff Battery, the one in what's Bellevue Park. would become Bellevue Park. Work started on the 4th of April 1782. 4 18-pounder guns were mounted there. There's a sketch of the gun battery. The North Battery, which was down on the seashore, work commenced on the 23rd of April 1782. 4 32-pounder guns, 2 9-pounder guns. And as you can see, it was a far more substantial fortification. On this picture, this is what would become Bellevue Park. This is probably the late 1860s, early 1870s, before the park was laid out. You can see in the background there, you can see the remains of the Cliff Battery, including the little thatched house. There's a horse tied up next to that. It'd become a private dwelling by then. The guns had all gone. But it looks to me as well, looking at that, as if the cliff wasn't artificially built up and leveled in order to build that thing, that gun battery. And if you look to the bottom left of the picture, you can see that roadway there. That's the bottom part of the ravine. So we're actually on the Gunton side here, on Gunton Cliff, looking south towards what would become Bellevue Park. So when you go to Bellevue Park and you go to where the Royal Naval Patrol Service Memorial is, you're standing approximately where the gun battery was once situated. And so the actual layout of the park at Sparrow's Nest is actually a faint reflection of how that area was laid out when the gun battery was there. So here's the bottom end of Lowestoft. Right at the top, the first few houses are on Old Nelson Street, and I gave a short version of this talk at the Old Bethel in the Lowestoft Players Theatre now, and the little red square on there is actually, if you're familiar with the Players Theatre, where it's located now on Battery Green Road. That's it wasn't there, obviously, back in the time that the gun battery was built, but that gives you some idea of where it is located. It would have been located on this map, had it, if you could sort of wind back the clock and plop it in place. Okay, and the government, His Majesty's government, needed more land in which to build their new fortification. The Maids Acre belonged to Lowestoft, and on the 3rd of April 1782, it was leased by the Crown from the town of Lowestoft at £2.05, £2.50 rent per year. Other land was also needed to make sure the gun battery was big enough. And on the 3rd of April that same year, the pink area of land that you see behind Maids Acre, to the west of Maids Acre, was purchased from Mrs. Reeve for His Majesty for £78.15. 30th of March, 4 days earlier, 1782, the piece of land I've marked in yellow was purchased from a gentleman called Gibson Lewis, also for the price of £78.15. And much later, the small blue area that you can see at the top, that's where the entrance to the battery would eventually be. That was purchased from a Mr. Mark Wootton for His Majesty for the price of £10. And as you can see from this map, the road southwards past, this is the road to Kirkley and onwards to Pakefield, passed immediately in front of the Maids Acre. To the east of that were the open scrubby deans, and then the beach, and then much closer than it is today, was the North Sea. So this is the land that's needed by the military to build their fort. In total, it covered, the area of the fort covered 2.5 acres. So it's quite a large area of land, much more than the small area that had been the earlier 1744 gun battery on the Maids Acre. Having purchased the land, it was then necessary to build a gun battery, or as they tended to refer to it back then, more as a fort. And as my talk progresses this evening, I think you'll see why it was described as a fort as much as a gun battery. So 2.5 acres of land, all legally obtained by the government, and so work could commence. So if we go to the next slide, please. We know the name of the person who designed it. He was Colonel Debig, Royal Engineers. He was one of the chief engineers for fort building for the army at the time, and work actually commenced on the 7th of January 1782. So they didn't waste a lot of time getting going, and they employed 300 men to work on the battery, on the building of the battery. And also a company of the 10th Regiment of Foot was helped to protect the fort in case of an invasion while work was being carried out. It's quite interesting as well. I love the way things are joined up. The 10th Regiment of Foot would later become the Lincolnshire Regiment, and the Lincolnshire Regiment is now, the remains of it, or its name, its title, is still embodied in a company of the 2nd Battalion Royal Anglian Regiment. So there is this kind of link militarily. And of course, you have to remember, while all this building work is going on, we've got soldiers in the town, we've got a large encampment and garrison up at Hopton. There's another gun battery being built down at Pakefield. I haven't been able to find out where exactly that was located. And here you can see, I've superimposed now the actual plan of the battery of guns that was built there. So it must have been a hive of well, it was a hive of activity, and quite how the townsfolk felt about it. Probably some were excited, some were worried that an invasion could take place at any time, and the troops had to be billeted in the town. They obviously bought some, that they had money in their pockets, I would assume, so it probably helped to a certain extent, as always happens when you get a military establishment close by. It probably helped the economy of the town as well. So as I say, Colonel Debig, I think that's pronounced, designed the fort, the battery, and it was protected by a company of the 10th Regiment of Foot, and work commenced on the 7th of January 1782, and 300, according to Gillingwood, I don't know if he counted them, 300 men were employed on constructing this fort. So we pass on to the next. So let's have, there's a small drawing of the fort I superimposed. Here is a contemporary drawing of it. And so what was here? What did the fort comprise of? It's very close to the sea. So there at the north, coming down Old Nelson Street, would have been the entrance of the fort. When we finish with this, you can see there was a ditch all the way around the fort. It was 18 feet deep, 15 feet wide, and it went all the way around the fort. And you can see the other side of that was a 4-foot wide terrace. So if you got through the ditch, you still had to climb up onto a terrace. You didn't get straight in. The embrasure, that's the raised bit hiding the cannon, was 18 feet wide and 8 feet high. And the cannon were installed. The glasses, that's the cleared area that would later become Battery Green, 65 yards wide and very, very close to the sea. In total, there were 10 32-pounder cannon installed in the most, pointing in the most vulnerable direction. That's south along the Denes and southeast out to sea. And there was 3 smaller 18-pounder cannon in the northeast corner. And just to make certain that it was very well protected in case it was stormed by infantry, in the ditch roundup was a chevet de frise, which were large wooden pointed sticks mounted in the ditch to stop people should they manage to get up the glasses and try and storm the fort. Not only had they to negotiate an 18-foot deep ditch, but they also had to fight their way through these sticks. So it's an impressive piece of kit. Entrance, Gillingwater tells us, the entrance at the north had a drawbridge, and as you look just to the south of the entrance on my plan here, you can see a small earthwork. That's a breastwork to defend the entrance. It was 18 feet thick and 8 feet high. It's immediately opposite the entrance. The entrance is probably only wide enough for one man to get through. And so the defenders, should the attackers try and get through the entrance of the fort, they could hide behind that embrasure to fire at it. The magazine that you see there, we're told, was 12 feet wide, 30 feet long, and it was sunk beneath the ground. And according to Gillingwater, it was bomb-proof. I don't think it means modern bombs by any means. I don't think it would have been that bomb-proof. The reason it was bomb-proof and is sunk behind under the ground is because it was capable of containing 300 barrels of gunpowder. Also, there was a guardhouse in there, and Gillingwater obviously had seen it. He describes in his history there, he tells us that in the centre of the fort stood the guardhouse. This was a handsome sashed building, about 70 feet long and 26 feet wide, having a spacious parade ground in front. At the southwest angle stood the flagstaff, 55 feet high, on which was hoisted an English jack. In other words, the Union Jack. And so we have this very, very impressive, and it must have looked very, very impressive when it was first built. The only problem, and I'll come back to that later, was you can't see it too clearly on this drawing, but the road travelling south past the Maids Acre was built over and had to be diverted, and it was diverted round the glasses 65 yards to the east of the fort, which meant it was almost literally on the beach. Then as it got to the south of the glasses, it swung south to join the original road down through to Kirkley and beyond. And the battery was completed. It took nigh on a year to build. The battery was completed on the 21st of December, 1782. Now it had to be manned. the guns need crews, there needed to be soldiers, there needed to be guards. And if we go on to the next slide, please. So there's an artist's impression of the fort, of the gun battery. And Gillingwater goes on to tell us that on the 29th of December, that's 8 days after the fort, the battery was completed, he arrived, well, I'll read what he said. Colonel Debig arrived at Lowestoft and informed the inhabitants that government had received undoubted information of an intended invasion shortly to be made on the coast near Yarmouth. Therefore requested to be informed, this is a bit of bad planning here, if anything, therefore requested to be informed whether the town was able to furnish 200 men to work the guns at the batteries. So they got the batteries, they got the gun battery, they got the fort, they've got everything built, but they haven't got enough men to man the gun batteries. Upon this application, a meeting was called of the inhabitants to take the same into consideration. When the answer was returned that by reason of the great number of sailors belonging to the town being employed in the navy, it was impossible to obtain the number of men required. But as you can see, 3 weeks later, a peace treaty was signed and the war with Holland ended. So the gun battery, including this battery, including the Cliff Battery and the North Battery, became obsolete. And they never fired the guns in anger. Whether the fort was ever properly manned, we're not informed. Gillingwater, sorry, excuse me. Gillingwater tells us that as the war was terminated on the 20th of January, following by a general peace, the fortifications which have been so lately erected at this town at a great expense will probably soon fall into utter decay. And so right he was. I think he, not being a historian, he'd seen what had happened to the gun batteries stretching back for the last 200 years that had been built and then not used and became unusable, disused, fallen into decay and then been replaced again. I think he was astute enough to realize this was probably going to happen to this wonderful gun battery here. A couple of contemporary pictures of the artist's impressions perhaps on the next couple of slides. So if we can run the next slide please for me. So here's a view looking southeast. There you can see that giant flag staff. You can see what I would imagine must be the guardhouse, the gable end of the guardhouse. You can see soldiers lined up in front of the guardhouse there, and you can see just how close the fort was to the beach. There you can see the ships and the roads there, and obviously how vulnerable, should an invasion have taken place, that the town would have been from an invasion towards the south end of the town. So this is a lovely view. And the next one again, should change to that in a moment. And here is a view of a house. Do you remember the gable-ended house that I mentioned right towards the beginning, to the north of the battery? Well, this is it, and you can see just to the right, to our right of the building, you can see the flagstaff of the battery, and beyond that, the sails of ships actually in the roads. That house is still in existence. It was known back in the day as Ivy House. It's still there, and there it is today. And the building that you can see right to the right and behind it, roughly where the Flagstaff was seen in the last picture, that's JME Electronics, which was actually built on part of the battery, as we shall see. So it was a bit of a flash in the pan. There is a mystery attached. This is a view looking north, a much later view, probably very late Victorian or even Edwardian view, looking up Old Nelson Street from standing on the Battery Green, the old glacis that was in front of the battery. You're looking up Old Nelson Street, looking to the north up into the town. The house in the centre with all the people on the balcony, that unfortunately is now the site of a car park, but that's was known as Bow House. Now there's a tradition in the town that in actual fact it was built as a canteen for the soldiers and presumably the men working to build the fort. There is no written evidence that I've come across, and I don't think any of my fellow historians have, that this was actually the canteen, but it was supposedly became a pub later known as the canteen. Again, I have no evidence of that, but a couple of years back when I was cataloguing deeds in the their old Lowestoft record office, I came across a loose bundle of deeds, and there was one for a building somewhere to the in the south area of Old Nelson Street, and it was a pub, and it was called the Canton. And I just can't help wondering if, in actual fact, that's not the same building, and Canton was actually a corruption or probably a mishearing of the word canteen. So there's a possibility, perhaps even more than that, a probability that this wonderful house, Bow House, now long since gone, car park for the courthouse, no longer a courthouse, just to the north of here, was demolished, and a car park was laid out. So that's really, in a nutshell, the story of the reasons why a battery of guns was erected at the south end of the town, and two others in the town to the north and east, and how it was built, what it looked like, as I say, why it was there, and also the fact that obviously it wouldn't have been known at the time, but it was a bit of a turned out to be an unnecessary white elephant, because the the war only lasted just over a year, just in time to build a battery of guns, ironically. But like everything else, there is a knock-on effect. So what I want to do now is to move forward. I have to say, and look at repercussions. Whenever you make a big change anywhere, it be it today or years ago, there is a knock-on effect. So I'm looking at the knock-on effect of building this battery. It could be argued that so here's the map of the plan of the South Battery. My red dotted line marks the approximate course of the original road south out of Lowestoft, Old Nelson Street, onto this road, and then down to Kirkley. And as you can see, the road had to be diverted round the glacis, the area cleared to give a clear field of fire to the cannon of the battery in the fort. And that little blue triangle that I put in there just shows you how close that road came to the sea. not a good thing, because it seems that as every so often when we got an extra high tide, local people, I think it was last week, we had quite, fortunately it was a very still day, but very, very high tides along here, and quite a lot of water coming ashore. Imagine that high tide back in the late 18th century. It would almost certainly have washed the road for a while until the tides till the tides retreated and the road could be repaired, ready for the next time it needed to be repaired. So eventually, again, this is harkened back to, I covered this subject a little bit. Eventually, something had to be done. And if we just click to the next slide now. Again, if you've seen another one of my talks, I did mention this. In 1785, an Act of Parliament, the 25th of George III, Chapter 116, the Suffolk Road Act, was passed, and this enabled a new road to be constructed further to the west, away from the beach and away from the seaside. It was called, it would become known as the London Turnpike Road. And of course, that in itself would lead to all sorts of changes in the topography of the land and the layout of the parish south of the town. So here you can see I've arrowed the road on my map, and at the top there you can see that lozenge shape of the battery. Beyond that is what today is Old Nelson Street, with the first houses of the town proper. And you can see that the road, as far as we've been able to tell, I've been able to tell through my research, ran due south, diverted round the glacis of the battery, the area that would become known as Battery Green, and south across the Kirkley parish boundary and into Kirkley and so on to Pakefield. And it seems by all the evidence of earlier maps that here again, it basically along the cliff top. And so this new road by the Act of Parliament was cut, and it became known as the London Turnpike. It continued all the way through Kirkley and eventually joined up with Pakefield. So it's a dead straight road cutting its way through the town, and it starts just below the place where today the Triangle Market, St. Peter's Street and the High Street converge, and it's still there today. But that would lead to, as we shall see in a moment, to a knock-on effect. And I will be coming back to Battery Green in a moment, but that is probably the biggest change occasioned by the building of the gun battery. Had the gun battery not been built there, there's a good chance possibly that they would never have bothered to build a new road, and thus change the complete topography of this part of Lowestoft and Kirkley. And if we just click on to the next slide, please. And of course, here's a view looking north up the turnpike, a much, much later view where all the land each side has been developed. And you're looking up, I'm sure the view will be familiar to one or two Lowestoft people, familiar in the fact you can stand there today and see the same view. And right in the distance, you can see the bottom end of Lowestoft High Street and the old town. Interestingly enough, if you see the gate in the foreground on the right, that's the ground entrance to a school that was built there called the British School. If you entered that gate, walked through the yard, past the school, you would actually come up against the west wall of the gun battery. So we're not that far away from the gun battery. So that's the London Turnpike. I just go have a drink of water. I'll just leave that with you for a moment. So the map that you see there is from the Lowestoft tithe map of 1842. And again, towards the top, you can see the outline of the battery, number, I think that's 775, 776, the battery green and in front of it. And you can see the land that has been chopped up by the building of the new road by 1842 has been sold off into building lots. And London Road North is developing. The town is expanding south. And now I should say that I found it incredibly difficult to find any data, partly because there's no access to the local records office for me to check. And so I can't really look for much contemporary stuff. But from the end of the war with Holland in January 1783, there's very, very little record. We don't have a local newspaper until 1874, no Lowestoft journal till 1874. And so there is a Lowestoft column in the Norfolk Chronicle, and I searched from 1782 right through to 1874 on the British Newspaper Archive to see what I could find about what's happening with the battery of guns, and particularly the battery green. And there's very, very scarce information at all. As we get nearer to the present day, particularly nearer into Victorian times and our local newspaper, there is more information. The road has been extinguished. The old road that ran the Battery Green, the Glasses south, and as you can see here, the land between where that was and the new Turnpike Road has been developed into two large private estates. The biggest one to the south, well, let's start from the other way. The smaller of the two, immediately to the south of the gun battery, that was known as the St Margaret's estate, and the house that stood there, in fact still stands there today. It's the house that's it's now on Gordon Road, opposite the entrance to Wilkinson's shop department store, the big house with the turret there. Then further south than that, another large estate, 6.5 acres. Again, I've touched on this in other talks. This is the Grove estate. But one of the earliest pieces of information that I could find, that although the battery of guns is no longer being used as a gun battery and seems to become derelict, the local militia, we had artillery militia and artillery volunteers and also rifle volunteers, they were using the Battery Green for as a parade ground, and it's also becoming a gathering place for local people, especially when there's the annual August regatta out to sea. An ideal viewing point would be from the Battery Green. But there was push for a road in 1853 to replace the road that had been closed when the new Turnpike Road was built. And in this press cutting, March the 10th, Lowestoft, March the 10th, in the Norfolk Chronicle, 12th of March 1853. I don't know if you can read that, but it says, ignore the fact that well, it's quite nice to know that There's been no single accident in this town and neighbourhood arising from the recent frosts. Okay, but public improvement, a great improvement is about being made by the construction of a carriage drive from the bathhouse. That's just at the bottom of Old Nelson Street, from the bathhouse and Battery Green to the harbour. Notices are issued inviting tenders for that purpose. The Messrs. Lucas Brothers have deposited their plans for the inspection of our tradesmen, and they now go on to explain. So there was plans afoot in 1853 to build or rebuild, if you like, the old public highway that was closed under the Act of Parliament when the Turnpike was laid out. So we go to the next slide, please. And here is a plan. It's not very clear. North is to the right, to our right of the map. South is obviously to the left. You can see now a much larger harbour has been built. Running straight across the top, a third of the way down the map, is the Turnpike Road. You can see a little way in centre right, you can see the South Battery, Old Nelson Street, and you can see this is the plan to build or replace the old road, running past the Battery Green. By this time it's known as Battery Green, as you can see from the map, and to go down and join the Turnpike road. It's what would become Battery Green Road, leading into Waveney Road and joining up with the Turnpike with London Road North, more or less opposite the railway station. And that would enable more transport to get down to the harbour. So the road was in actual built, and that would become known as Battery Green Road. And reason, presumably, they decided to lay out, replace the road, if you like, was the fact that with the new harbour being built and the North Pier, as it was known, you can see on the map, the longshore drift was beginning to build up the beach in this area, and the high water mark now is much further to the east. And so they must have decided, improvement commissioners, we didn't have a town council as such back in the day, we had this body called the improvement commissioners. They must have decided that it was now safe to replace the ancient roadway. Of course, they couldn't continue it all the way south to Kirkley because the harbour now was in the way. So that's the reintroduction or the rebuilding of the ancient highway out of Lowestoft past the Battery Green. We move on to the next slide, please. So here's a contemporary, this is dated 1863. This is the land that belongs to the War Department. You can see from this drawing that the front of the embrasure where the cannon were held now seems to have been demolished. Those are the three pieces of land. Maids Acre is actually marked, that belongs to the town. The other bits of land are claimed by the War Department. Nelson Street, as it's called there, now Old Nelson Street, going off to the right, Wapplewood Road, bottom right, leading off to the right, and you can see the new road skirting the Battery Green. There was apparently a bit of an argument between the War Department and the town of Lowestoft as to who actually owned what, and the War Department claimed that that area within the green line was in fact did belong to the War Department, and Lowestoft had no rights over it. That was a bit contentious because it was originally common land. And so as you can see, we definitely by 1863, the battery, the fort, although the buildings seem to be there, the guardhouse and the magazine still seems to be there, you can see that the actual fort itself, the battery, seems to have been demolished. And there, out of interest, you can see almost slap bang in the middle where it says the west side of the old road. I don't see quite how the military could claim that that land there was theirs when in actual fact it belonged to the town and was the course of the original old road. So we'll push on. We've still got a little bit more ground to cover as yet. So here's a view looking across. This view is probably about I'm trying to think, it's about 1856, if my memory serves me right. So we're looking across to the Battery Green. The great flagpole and masts inside the fort still seem to be there. And to the left of that, our left, half hidden by some bushes, you can see the what appears to be the guardhouse. But you can see at this time, even then, how close the road and the Battery Green is to the sea, and it did cause problems. In 1863, the Norfolk Chronicle recorded that the paving committee, that's the committee of the improvement commissioners, the paving committee reported that the late high tide had washed away a portion of the southeast corner of the Battery Green Road. History repeats itself, and which the surveyor was repairing. The committee was requested to watch the state of the road and, if necessary, to have cut and placed the quantity of furze faggots at the foot of the embankment. This subject led to the conversation in which the cause of the late damage was considered to arise from the harbour authorities excavating sand thereto for the ballast of vessels. So the harbour authorities, by that time it would be the Great Eastern Railway Company, were actually digging out all the accumulated shingle and sand to use in the balance of the ships. And apparently when the tide came, it just washed over these excavations up onto Battery Green. Mr. Youngman, one of the improvement commissioners, said he thought it would be advisable to caution the harbour authorities against coming too near the road with their excavations. So the sea has always been, until the harbour was extended northwards, the sea has always been a problem there. And again, I'm sure you can see where we are, but a quarter of the way in from the right, you can just see Old Nelson Street now, taking you back up into Lowestoft High Street, and to the extreme left you can see the backs of the lodging houses that have been built on the Turnpike Road, and the house almost dead central is the one I showed you the modern photograph of, Ivy House, which is now the solicitors' offices. So it's still possible to get some perspective on this, but we need to push on to the next slide, please. This is a wonderful photograph. This is looking due east. Basically, I don't know the date. I should think it's the 1860s, and we're actually standing with our backs to the gun battery, looking across the Battery Green, the glasses plate at the front, the cleared area, and looking out to sea. And you can see on the extreme left a couple of bathing machines on the beach. And again, it just brings home how close this area was until the harbour was extended to the sea. I think this is a wonderful picture. It gives you some idea of what the area was like. And those posts that you can see on the left-hand side, just on the edge of the green, from what I can gather, are posts that were marked out by the War Department to mark the boundary of the land that belonged to them. But that's an incredible picture. It takes us back to a time when Lowestoft was an incredibly different place to what it is today. If we go to the next slide now, please. Certainly by the this time, here's a painting, rather nice primitive little drawing, and we are looking east again. The bottom of Old Nelson Street is on the left. You can't really see the street. The building, the furthest building, that low white building, that's the bathhouse. Beyond that is the beach and the sea. But the white gate structure is actually where the northern entrance to the battery is, or was. And you can see there the raised grassy area, bottom right-hand corner. That is the overgrown northeast corner of the gun battery itself. It looks as if here, and we know that was the case, that the deep trenches were filled in. And we have a report here again. It wasn't the most salubrious of places. And this is a letter dated 1868, published in the Norfolk Chronicle in the Lowestoft column, from 100 of the principal ratepayers. And again, it gives you just an insight at a time. These 100 principal, or upwards of 100 principal ratepayers say, we, the undersigned inhabitants and ratepayers of the town of Lowestoft, are desirous to see a more preservative control exercised over the Battery Green. That no charming a spot bordering on the sea in the centre of a town possessing a port, the head of a double branch of the Great Eastern Railway, and a favourable resort of visitors should have been permitted to remain so long unimproved, has been and is a matter of general regret. We therefore respectfully suggest that if the Battery Green was enclosed by a wall 4.5 feet high, with walking gate, a raised path inside the wall, flagged on the slope, it would not only prevent an accumulation of sand, but make it an attractive and pleasant promenade for the inhabitants and visitors. And we believe there is a fund applicable for public improvements, and that the one suggested might be effected without any additional charge upon the ratepayers. We earnestly hope that you will give this matter your serious consideration and carry out the general wishes of the inhabitants. And this is from the report of the Improvement Commissioners, and they say this has been seen, that this has been referred to the Land Committee. On the subject of sand, one of the problems on the Battery Green, it's very, very sandy. And every week, the local volunteers are drilling on this area, and quite a number of them. And there are quite a lot of complaints, other letters. Obviously, I can't go through the whole lot, complaining that the volunteers, when they drill on the Battery Green, are destroying the turf and kicking up, exposing the sand and spoiling the whole area. And from another note that I've got here, some years later, but by 1881, the volunteers are actually banned from using this piece of land to drill on. They have to find another drill ground because of the damage that's being done and the fact that the Battery Green is being improved. So we move on to the next slide, please. So here's a much earlier view, standing on Battery Green, looking north. You can see Bow House on the right. We're looking up Old Nelson Street, and you can see there the sandy area there. That appears to be where the original embrasure of the fort was built. It seems to have been removed and demolished, and the area is becoming very overgrown. But you can see at this time, and it's a little bit difficult to date this, but I should say this is possibly the 1880s. And also the town council, the improvement commissioners, their minute books tell us that on the 14th of November 1870, they put a notice up that any person found obstructing the footpaths within the limits of the above act by placing thereon any goods, merchandise, casks, tubs or other articles, implements or things will be prosecuted according to the provisions of that Act of Parliament. It's signed by the clerk, Mr. Seago, the clerk to the commissioners, and quite a lot of tradesmen were beginning to use the Battery Green, parts of the green, to store, particularly fish merchants, to store their barrels and their tubs and their carts and stuff that they didn't want. And so the improvement commissioners had this notice put up warning them that if anybody did obstruct this area, particularly the pathways, they would be prosecuted. So we go to the next slide, please. And so you can see this is 1783. This is what was there at the time. There's the battery, there's the Battery Green, there's the Deans, there's the road, the old road, there's the North Sea. And what a difference 100 years makes. And here is the Ordnance Survey Map of 1883, 100 years later. You can see the Coast Guard station is marked there, built with the Coast Guard cottages within the boundaries of the battery, the fort itself. Battery Green has now been extended from the old glasses at the front southwards into this area. And we can see, again, it wasn't the most nicest area. There was lots of undesirables got on there. Nothing really changed in this world, I don't think. And there's a report here in the Lowestoft Journal from 1878 October saying, entitled "Wanton Mischief. We regret to record another instance of wanton mischief perpetrated on Monday night last, and can only hope the offenders might be discovered. It appears that sometime during Monday night, the seats and chairs, so highly appreciated by numbers and standing on the Battery Green, were ruthlessly smashed to pieces and so mutilated that we fear some are irredeemably sacrificed. We hear that a considerable number of fishermen went in that direction late on Monday night, and it is supposed that they were the authors of the damage. There was a lot of damage recorded in the newspapers, vandalism, and young couples getting there at night, up to unmentionable deeds, as the papers at the time mentioned. And then the next report, 1879, the Battery Green is beginning to improve. The paving committee recommended that the sum of 5 shillings per year be paid to the War Office Department in consideration of encroachments made upon their abutting the Battery Green. So they're now actually leasing some of the land that actually still belongs to the War Department, the town are. And the chairman of the improvement commissioners said that they would remember that there was a large ditch on the outside of the fence of the Battery Green belonging to the War Office. That had been partly filled up by sand. Some few gentlemen who had played a principal part in beautifying Battery Green thought it would be much better still to fill up the rest and thus improve the place. This was the land for which the rent was paid. The recommendation of the committee was adopted, and the action taken by the gentlemen interested in improving Battery Green was approved. And so slowly by the late 1870s, early 1880s, somebody is definitely on the Improvement Commission, soon to become the Borough of Lowestoft, and the Town Council were finally taking an interest in Battery Green and getting it improved. So we push on to the next slide, please. And then in 1884, finally, this notice appeared in the Lowestoft Journal. The commissioners, that's the Improvement Commission again, the commissioners acting under the execution of the above act, that's the Improvement Act of 1854, invites tenders for the erection of a wrought iron boundary fence on the Battery Green at Lowestoft. Plans and specifications to be seen at the Surveyor's Office, Town Hall daily, from 10 till 5. Tenders endorsed Battery Green to be sent to the undersigned, etc., etc. And that's signed by the clerk of the commissioners. And the cost of doing that, to enclose it and put a fence around it and make it much more inhabitable, was done at a cost of £156. So here we are now. This is a favourite spot for taking photographs back then. This is much later. This is probably early 1900s now. We're standing in the middle of Battery Green. It's been fenced in. There's a hedge round it. We're looking north up Old Nelson Street. Lamps have gas lamps presumably have been installed to light it. There's one by the entrance at the bottom of Old Nelson Street. There's another one in the middle here. New benches have been erected, and so by this time it's becoming a much nicer area, and also very, very popular. By the time this photograph was taken, the sea had long since receded. Well, the sea hadn't receded. The harbour had been built, and chances of incursions from the sea are less and less. So we're coming now through towards the end of the talk. I'm having so here's a photograph I understand was taken a very early colour photograph. I think this was taken in the 1930s. Again, we're on Battery Green. It's now been paved or concreted over. We're looking due north, and right in the background there is Bow House and the entrance to Old Nelson Street. And interestingly enough to me, on the left, you can see all the big overgrown area, which marks the site of the battery of guns itself. The glasses, as has now been levelled and paved over, and has become, and would do for many, many more years. I can remember when there was go-kart racing on there when I was much younger. It was used a lot, and it became quite a sorry, excuse me, I just had a sip of water. And of course, here we have a later picture. It became, there was a bus station there, a coach depot there. There's the waiting room of the coach depot. This is where certainly in the 1950s and 1960s, as I can remember, this is where the grey-green coach bus service, picked up passengers for the direct route to London. We're looking west here. The church in the middle distance, that's the building where Sports Direct now stands on London Road North. The Coast Guard cottages that you can see there, they're a bit of an enigma date-wise. I can't find any reference anywhere in local newspapers to them being erected. They're erected on the old War Department ground that has been transferred to the Admiralty. When the census was taken in 1881, they are not listed, but only building listed there is the Coast Guard officers, which is the ones you can see the gable end on. That's there, but the cottages aren't there, but they're definitely marked, as we saw little short while ago. They are definitely marked on the 1883 Ordnance Survey Map. So it would appear that the Coast Guard building, officers, headquarters were built first. They were certainly there by 1881, and between 1881 and 1883 the Coast Guard cottages themselves were erected. So we'll push on to the next slide, please. We're getting to the end here now. This is an interesting picture. This is over top of the Hamilton dock, and we're looking due west, and we're looking at the Battery Green. It's that light coloured paved over area. If your eyes are sharp, you can actually pick out almost dead centre the coach station bus shelter. There was a tea rooms, a coffee shop there as well. My red line that I hope you can see just going round, that marks the extent of the Battery Green. And the white building, I'll come on to that in a second. And we just mark out here with this red line, this is the boundary of the fort, the battery itself. And that white building just inside the boundary that you can see there, that was the repeater station for the telephones going through to Europe. It's now it now belongs to and is the offices of JME Electronics, still there today. So that's a good indicator as to where the battery was, but more of that later. The arrow there has just appeared. That points to the Marina Theatre, just to give you some sense of what's what on this picture. The next arrow that appears, that's looking across to, that's the old Lowestoft police station in Police Station Road. And right in the top right-hand corner of this picture, you can see when the arrow decides to point to it, you can actually see Lowestoft Hospital, and there is Lowestoft Hospital. And in the foreground, that lovely 1930s building, well, I suppose it's a lovely one, Hamilton House, that's dead centre of the photograph, which I should have marked with a star, and it should point in a moment. Interestingly, this photograph appears to be taken in the late 1940s, early 1950s. If you were up in a helicopter today and looked this direction, you wouldn't be able to see the old police station, for instance, because that's where the now empty Beale's department store stands. And this is the bomb site, in actual fact, where the buildings were demolished after being badly damaged during the Second World War. And of course, Hamilton House is now the home and offices of the newly formed Lowestoft Town Council. We go to the next slide. And again, this is a view across the Battery Green, probably in the 1970s. I'm sure some of you buffs on cars can date that as roughly when it was. We're looking across Battery Green towards Battery Green Road, and there's Hamilton House in the background, then Price's Warehouse. And by the 1970s, this had become, like so many open spaces in Lowestoft, this had actually become a car park. With the advent of more and more cars, more and more parking space was needed. And so this was laid out as a car park. I'll just get back to my notes here. And again, that was replaced. The car park was built over, virtually Battery Green was built over by the Battery Green multi-storey car park that opened to the public on the 5th of November 1982. Here you see it under construction. So basically that and the changes in the road layout and the large roundabout at the bottom of Old Nelson Street, where Gordon Road now joins it in front of the Coast Guard cottages, that has more or less totally obliterated the old Battery Green. The Admiralty handed back all the land that they owned to Lowestoft in the 1930s, and the coach park that I referred to earlier was first made, or the coach park was first made, or Battery Green was first made into a coach park in June 1936. The multi-storey car park was built, when it was built, according to the architect, the windows were designed to give it the look of a gun battery, as a salute to what was previously stood in its place. Well, the gun battery never stood there, but grant them that, but it doesn't look like much like a gun battery to me. And of course, all things must change from time to time, and of course that became unsafe only a few years ago, and basically was demolished down to ground level. And so that's the Battery Green. We've got a couple more slides I just want to run by you. If we can just change to the next slide, please. Here's an aerial view today. And so immediately at the bottom is the multi-storey car park. We're looking at the roof of Wilkinson's. There's St. Margaret's house. There's the large roundabout at the bottom of Old Nelson Street. Coming up from the bottom is Battery Green Road. There's a shopping precinct and London Road South you can see there. And slap bang in the middle is the site of the original gun battery, the fort, if you want, and where the Coast Guard cottages stand today. And if this slide is going to do what it should do, I'll just mark the boundaries of that. There we go. There's the boundaries of the north, west, and part of the south boundary of the fort, of the gun battery itself. The front has obviously completely disappeared under the new road, under Gordon Road, or the extension of Gordon Road as was, and the roundabout. So Battery Green itself, there. If you're feeling adventuresome, if you go down there, cross to the round traffic island in the middle of the road there, you are standing right in the center. And if you've parked, you can't really do it because of the trees in the way, but if you could, you stood there and turned and faced Coast Guard cottages, you would be standing in the middle of the glacis plate of the old fort, with Battery Green extending to your left. If you're really feeling adventuresome, I'll give you a couple more slides to end on, if you fancy. As I said, and finally, if you're feeling just want to get a flavour and a sense of what was there, and you live in Lowestoft, you can even drive and come here if you want. We like visitors. This is immediately to the north of St Margaret's house on Gordon Road. This photograph is taken with my back to Wilkinson's shop on the road. Coast Guard Cottages in the back, and this is the back boundary wall of the old fort, the old gun battery, looking along what was the western ditch, filled in, obviously, the western ditch of the gun battery itself. Whether the wall has any connection with the battery or not, I have my suspicions it's a later build, possibly erected there when the Coast Guard station and Coast Guard cottages were erected. So that's you can walk up there, and you're literally walking along the top of what was the ditch to the west of the battery. This is the bottom. That's JME Electronics there. So that's the corner, the northeastern corner of the battery. Where the arrow points, there is a public footpath, and you can go there. With bottom of Old Nelson Street, it's a public footpath, and you can go through there, and you can track along what would have been the north wall of the gun battery. That's where the entrance into the gun battery would have been, just somewhere there. And you can track through there, and it will bring you out, if my slide changes in a few seconds. Let's just have another swill of water. It's a funny little path because it follows up to a point the outline of the gun battery, and it comes out here on London Road North on the shopping precinct, between the two buildings that you can see in the background. That arrow there's a little arched doorway there. That's where if you could of course go in this way and come out by Old Nelson Street, and it's a narrow little path. It basically follows the outline of the part of the gun battery. It's a narrow little path and well worth a little explore if you like to get a feel for what was there. So really that's my last slide, and as I said, it's not the end really, but just part of a much longer and bigger story. And thank you for watching tonight. I hope you found of some interest, and we go back to Paul.
Well, fantastic. It's a part of Lowestoft I've always wondered about myself. So I was very, very pleased to know that you were going to have a tackle of it tonight. So thank you very much for another. Just sorry. I was just going to say thank you very much for another fascinating talk. We've got a few comments coming in already. Linda Boyce said, I can remember the grey-green coaches being on Battery Green. I guess from the coach works that my father used to work at, actually. And we've got a comment from Sue Day saying, thank you for tonight, Ivan. And Linda says, thank you for an informative evening. Interesting that we had Dav. So sorry, Ivan, I'm cutting you off all the time here. You go first.
No, that's fine. I just, thank you, Linda, for turning out again. Well, you don't have to turn out, do you? For tuning in.
That's the beauty of it. Yeah, tuning in and turning out, one or the other. Yeah, Dav van der Brooker. Interesting that we had him tonight, as we had mention of the Dutch during 1780. I hope he's forgiven us after all this time. Interestingly, actually, Ivan, you also mentioned about the chevaux de frise, the anti-cavalry spikes in the moat.
Yeah.
They were actually a French invention. I'm sure you know this, but for anybody that doesn't, they were a French invention against the Dutch, or against the Frisians, from the Netherlands. They were said to be such amazing and agile horsemen that normal defences couldn't deter them, and apparently their horses themselves were of such strong and hardy, but also fast build, that they were a deadly force to be reckoned with. So this sort of precursor to barbed wire, I suppose, in many ways, was invented by the French to keep the Parisians at bay. Yeah. So interesting that we had Dav tuning in tonight. I'm guessing he's Dutch with a name like Van der Brooker, but if not, I hope you're not offended. Jerry Poole says, as always, so very interesting. Yep, as always. There's still, I'm sure Ivan will say himself, there's still so much more to be learned about Lowestoft, and we've covered an awful lot of ground, haven't we? Not just Lowestoft, but wherever we are. I love saying it. We've never had so much history.
Yeah, but tonight a little bit really. That episode, I mean, you're looking at a period probably covering max 15 months, but it's a very, very tiny little bit of the town's history. But it is a bit that's really, to me, is quite important. And these little tiny bits are quite important. They've gone because, unlike the witch trials, people tend to remember something like that. But when I was putting this presentation together, especially in the run up after the war to Holland and the scare of the warships and that, I was trying to put myself into this little town of approximately 4,000 people and trying to get inside their heads and wondering what sort of effect it was having on them, how they talked about it in the pubs, and it just got me. And yet I knew absolutely nothing about this until I started to do my research, and suddenly it's just a tiny little but important aspect of the history of the town that fascinates me. There are so many like that.
Yeah, I agree, Ivan. And as you were saying, what you do so well in these sessions is you paint the picture of the everyman. And like you said, a small town of just a few thousand being inundated by such a big military force, as they were, exactly as you said, it would have been quite a spectacle, almost overwhelming at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to go to a couple more comments before we wrap up. One is from Jackie Draper. Thanks a lot, Ivan. Paul and People's Health Trust, thank you. And James Wright, my old mate, says, thank you, Ivan. I've walked that alleyway a few times, oblivious to its history. Trevor Phelps says, excellent, thank you. And Karen Godbold says, thanks for your talk. Would I be right in thinking that the Fairbee would set up there? That the fair would set up there years ago. I can also remember the toilets and coach park.
I'm not. Sorry, excuse me. Their throat was gone. Yeah, I think they did used to have the fair on there. I'm not a North Lowestoft man. I grew up in Kirkley, you see, and I never came across the bridge in case I got attacked by the natives up this end. So, yeah, but I think you're right. I used to go down that way quite a bit because I had an uncle and grandfather who was still at sea, and I used to go down there. So I was aware of the Battery Green and the grey-green coaches that used to come off there. But I think probably you're right, Karen. I think the fair was there at one time.
I think when I was quite a small lad, I vaguely remember the fair being situated there. Of course, now it's on. It's actually just over the bridge, isn't it? Now I think. Yeah. It's been a while since I went to the fair, but yeah, I think. Yeah. Well, I'm going to say, Ivan, thank you very much. We're really looking forward to the next episode, which is in a fortnight's time. Don't forget, folks, it is the final episode so far. We're working hard to make sure it's not the final episode ever, but certainly for a short while, at least, the final session will be episode number 23, Monday, the 21st of December, just in time for Christmas. In the meantime, over the next fortnight, if you find yourself at a loose end, why not have a troll back over this episode, number 22, or even any of the 21 episodes prior to that you can find on our Facebook pages or on our YouTube channel, or even if you're really bored, you could check out the Tuesday night shanty sessions. We'll be here tomorrow night in the regular place at 7:30, Stephen and I, and we'll be singing you some shanties, giving you a little bit of historical context. Please do join us. We'd love to have you. In the meantime, Ivan, two last comments. One from Susan Anderton. Really interesting talk, Ivan. Thank you. And Diana Carver says, thanks again. And I say thank you, Ivan. It's been a fascinating talk. And one last thank you goes to the People's Health Trust for having us and funding us and keeping us going. In the meantime, why not have a little look at the books that are available by Ivan Bunn, A Return to Haunted Lowestoft and The Trial of Lowestoft Witches. These are just two books that are available at the moment. You should find them at Waterstones in Lowestoft, and they look a little bit like this. Lowestoft. This one is by Ivan Bunn and Henry Baker, A Return to Haunted Lowestoft. As I say, you can find that. We should be able to find that at Waterstones. And also The Trial of the Lowestoft Witches, which is a facsimile of the original report of the trial of Amy Denny, as mentioned earlier in this session, and Rose Calendar, 1662. This features a foreword by Mr. Ivan Bunn and is edited by Henry Baker, a good man himself. And if you would wish to purchase those, pop down to Waterstones in Lowestoft, or perhaps you can get it on pre-order from your local bookshop. Anyway, once again, Ivan, you've excelled yourself, and I say thank you very much. I can't wait to see you in a fortnight, and take care of yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Glad you enjoyed it. And I won't see you all, but I'll be with you all, for God's willing, in a fortnight's time. Take care. Stay safe.